The DEF tank relocation procedure. The following tools are needed for this procedure: 13 and 15 millimeter deep sockets, 13 and 15 millimeter combination wrenches, a medium-sized flat screwdriver, a floor jack, a cradle jig or a 2x6 by 14-inch block of wood, a telescoping magnet, measuring tape, level, square or straight edge. The DEF tank on Ford diesel trucks is located on the driver's side inside the frame rail. The unit can be relocated outside the frame rail on the passenger side in one of two places. We'll start with the removal process and then provide instructions for the standard upfitter installation, followed by the rear-mounted custom installation. Prior to doing either procedure, you'll need to disconnect the DEF supply line from the DEF pump. Locate the pump access panel on the bottom of the DEF tank. Using a flat blade screwdriver, pry the rivet from the center of the fastener assembly and remove the fastener. Press the tabs on either side of the access panel and swing the panel open. Disconnect the electrical connection for the DEF supply line heater by pressing the tab and holding it while separating the connectors. Remove the supply line by pressing the blue tabs on each side of the connector. A small amount of fluid may leak from the fitting. Place the cap that came with the kit over the DEF pump fitting. Flip the access panel back into place and reinstall the fastener and rivet. Remove the frame anchor clips from the fuel supply line. Disconnect the electrical connection by pressing the tab and holding it while separating the connectors. Using a jig and the floor jack or block of wood, place the jack under the DEF tank and raise the jack to support the tank. With the tank supported, remove the two nuts from the retaining straps. Swing both straps down and away from the tank. Lower the tank to access the connector tied to the inside of the frame rail and disconnect this. Lower the jack completely at this time. Grab the tank's two white straps and lower the tank onto the floor. Remove the jack. Slide the tank from under the frame. Move the jack outside of the frame and place the DEF tank back on the jack. Remove the existing mounting brackets from the frame rail. There are two on the outside of the frame and two on the bottom. Note that on some units, there's an additional bolt located on the inside of the frame rail. Ford's Relocation or Upfitter kit enables the tank to be placed directly behind the cab using existing mounting holes and Ford's custom brackets. The kit includes mounting brackets, wire harness extension, and miscellaneous bolts and fasteners. Install the supplied clip nut on the outside of the frame rail. Install the dual bolt assembly. Press the unit through the frame until it seats completely. Install the front mounting bracket. The clip nut uses a smaller 35 mm by 10 mm bolt included with the kit. The two rear mounting holes use the larger 50 mm by 10 mm bolts. Insert these bolts from inside the frame rail towards the outside and secure with the supplied lock nuts. Install the rear mounting bracket over the dual bolt assembly studs and secure with lock nuts. Reinstall the two nuts and tighten with a 13 mm socket. Install the tank straps. These will hang in place while you install the DEF tank. Lift the DEF tank into place with the floor jack. Be careful not to catch the wiring harness or tubes while lifting. Note that a new fill and vent tube will need to be installed before the chassis is placed on the truck. Swing the straps around the bottom of the tank and position these over the threaded rods. Reinstall the two nuts and tighten with a 13 mm socket. This concludes Ford's upfitter installation of the tank. We'll include the final connections after the rear-mounted custom installation. The custom installation procedure is necessary if you require the DEF tank to be moved back away from the cab and towards the spring shackle. With the original tank brackets removed, score the welds with a cutting wheel before cutting through these with a sawzall. We recommend that you place a 1.5 by 1/4 by 8-inch piece of steel on the inside of the bracket for added support. Clamp this into place with at least 1/8 of an inch protruding for the weld. You may also tack the piece at this location. Mark and measure for the mounting holes. Mark or center punch the existing bracket hole. From this point, measure exactly 4 inches towards the end of the bracket and mark this point. Drill each with a 1/4 inch pilot, followed by a 3/8, and finally a 1/2 inch drill bit. With the support bracket welded into place and the mounting holes drilled, grind the original welds and clean up the new ones. Paint the bracket with a black stove or rust-proof paint. While the paint is drying, we'll drill the new mounting holes for the DEF tank brackets. Use the top of the spring shackle as your starting point. Make 2 measurements. Measure 6 1/4 and 24 1/4 inches from the shackle towards the cab and mark this. Use a level or a square to make a long vertical line at each mark. Place a level or a straight edge along the top of the frame rail at both positions and measure down both 2 1/4 and 6 1/4 inches. Prior to drilling, ensure that there are no wires, harnesses, or tubes in the way. Pre-drill each mark with a 3/16 pilot followed by a 1/4 inch and finally a 3/8 inch drill bit. For this custom installation, you'll need 4 2 by 3/8 inch bolts, 4 3/8 nylock nuts, and 8 3/8 flat washers. Place a washer on each bolt and insert these from inside the frame rail out. Place a bracket over the bolts. Place a washer and nylock nut on the top bolt, holding the nut with a 9/16 box end wrench and tightening with a 9/16 socket and impact from inside the frame rail. The bottom washer and nut are more difficult to install. Using a telescoping magnet, slide the washer over the bottom bolt. Place a piece of tape over the box end wrench and press the nylock nut onto the wrench. Place the wrench and nut over the bolt and start the threads. Then, using your impact, tighten the bolt. Repeat the same procedure for the other bracket. Install the bracket straps. Lift the DEF tank into place with the floor jack. Be careful not to catch the wiring harness or tubes while lifting. Swing the straps around the bottom of the tank and position these over the threaded rods. Reinstall the 2 nuts and tighten with a 13 mm socket. The following connections apply to either installation. Connect the wiring harness extension to the chassis harness. Run the extension along the inside of the frame rail, across the top of the crossmember, behind the cab, and down the side of the frame on the passenger's side. Connect the extension to the DEF tank harness. Depending on the tank's location, you'll need to remove several of these retainer clips to be able to loop the supply line back towards the tank. Note, at a minimum, you must leave the supply line's retainer closest to the frame rail on the passenger's side. However, you'll need to remove all of the small retainer clips in order to protect the supply line with split loom. For the custom installation, cut a 3/8 inch piece of split loom approximately 3 feet long. For the Ford upfitter installation, cut a piece about 18 inches long. Place this over the supply line, starting at the tank connection. Feed the supply line over the bracket and down the back side of the DEF tank. Using the same process earlier, pry the rivet from the center of the fastener assembly and remove the fastener. Press the tabs on either side of the access panel and swing the access panel open. Reconnect the electrical connection for the line heater. Remove the plug from the pump fitting. Reconnect the supply line by pressing the connector onto the fitting. The blue clip should snap into place. Test this by pulling on the connections to ensure these are secure. Secure the fluid supply line and close the access panel. Reinstall the fastener and rivet. Test this by pulling on the line. Note that the custom installation requires a certain amount of slack in both the supply line and wiring harness. Use this image as a reference. Then, using zip ties, secure the harness extension to the crossmember, working your way back towards the chassis connector. Coil the remaining harness into a loop and secure tightly against the inside of the frame rail. Route the supply line as shown here, connecting the supply line to the harness extension with zip ties, making sure that you do not crimp the supply line or restrict its flow by tightening these too tightly. Make sure that neither the harness nor the supply line will interfere or come in contact with the body installation. Ensure that all fasteners are tightened, that all harnesses are properly secured, that the DEF supply line is routed properly, and there are no kinks in the line. Check to make sure that the engine light is not illuminated with the engine running and there are no leaks. This concludes the DEF tank relocation procedure.